Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video here today, and welcome to my reaction and analysis of the brand new Alpha Tauri for the F1 2020 season. Of course, the team formerly known as Scuderia Toro Rosso is now been rebranded completely to Scuderia Alpha Tauri, and yeah, in this video is my reaction and analysis, a video I wanted to do yesterday, but of course YouTube had some very different plans for me, but eventually we're going to get here and react to this. So, first of all, let's talk aesthetics of the brand new livery, because obviously it's the biggest change of any team in terms of livery, so I think this deserves a decent portion of the video. I really dig it. I really like what they've done, especially with the engine cover. I love the fact that unlike a lot of teams, they've gone with a design that it goes from the top of the engine cover all the way down to the side pod. So from a side-on view, the profiling, it just looks like a meaty bit of design. Like you can see really prominent logoing. Obviously for them, that's great in terms of advertising Alpha Tauri as a brand, which if you don't know, is Red Bull's clothing brand that they apparently have had for a while now or something, but I guess obviously no one knew about it clearly because I never heard of it. So the way they're trying to advertise it now is via the F1 team, I guess, and so they had a very bougie launch I saw with a lot of obviously like a basically fashion show essentially of all their clothing line before they actually launched the car itself. But yeah, and I think the actual side pod design as well works really well in terms of what they've done with the Honda stickering. You know, we've always had like concept liveries for the Red Bull team ever since they got partnered with Honda, of incorporating like the Japanese kind of flag into it, or like just that color scheme of like red on white, like having the rising sun or something like that. So it's not exactly like that, but it's a very similar color theme and very nice touch to have that. You know, it's very, you can straight away tell that's a Japanese sort of nod in terms of the way they've designed that to have the logo in red on purpose on the kind of grey white part of that. And yeah, like I said, I just love that entire corporation of that entire logo over the cross of it. The rest of it is pretty decent. I am a little bit iffy on the front view, the way the blue kind of just stops at the top of the chassis where the S duct is, and then just doesn't continue on. But of course, they wanted to have the sponsors very prominent, you know, in that kind of dark blue on the kind of white grey on the front wing. So it makes sense. But overall, really, really tasty. I just dig the fact that we've got a massive change finally for one of the teams. Obviously, you guys know from back in the day in F1 My Driver, I loved fantasizing about teams changing their liveries massively and doing these bold designs, and we never see it in Formula 1. Of course, for a good reason, because other teams, bigger, you know, the big teams want to build brands and stuff like Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull. You know, you have kind of iconic looks, and you know that's their brand of the way the car looks. So we don't really get massive changes. So it's really awesome to see when a team like this changes massively, and that's why I'm excited for Racing Point when they become Aston Martin to see how that changes quite dramatically in 2021. But yeah, no, fair dues to Alpha Tauri. Got to remember that now, no longer Toro Rosso, Alpha Tauri. I'm sure a lot of us will still call it Toro Rosso by mistake, like a lot of us sometimes call Racing Point Force India by mistake. Because they'll always just be kind of that team still, really, in the original. But, yeah, Alpha Tauri. Hopefully it doesn't get too confusing with Alfa Romeo. But now, let's talk about the technical side of things. But do let me know in the comments below, guys, before we get to that, what you guys think of the livery. Are you digging it? Do you not, potentially? Because I can see maybe, you know, there are parts that I don't alter like. But overall, I think it's a very decent look. And I think it's a really refreshing look. And, I don't know, in a way, I almost think that it's the way it was always going to look, with the kind of the way the AlphaTauri logo is. I don't think they could have gone any kind of other way, really, apart from this, perhaps. But let's look now into the technical part of the car and look at, you know, hopefully how AlphaTauri is shaping up to make another solid year. They had a very decent year last year, of course, amazing podium at the end of last season. But let's look at the technical side of things. Now, they've got a lot of nods, I will say, from the Red Bull team. As you would expect, obviously, Toro Rosso and Red Bull, especially in the last few years, have shared a bit more, because I believe they share completely, like, the actual rear end of the car now is very much the same as the previous Red Bull here, but they've got a lot of nods to what Red Bull have done in past seasons. You can see straight away, if we look at the S duct, very much a copycat of what Red Bull had last season. Obviously, Red Bull have added on winglets on the top to try and further kind of move the flow as they want to the top of the chassis, but a clear nod and copy off from Red Bull. And the same way with the actual inlets for the S duct is a nod to what Red Bull had 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago, where the inlets just a small little cubby on the side of the nose cone. And there's the same thing with just the way the nose is profiled, I feel. It kind of more looks like what Red Bull used to have, and kind of taking into kind of inspiration, especially with the way the actual nostril, the actual point on the nose has been shaped through, very much like what Red Bull had maybe 2-3 seasons ago. Obviously similar to what Toro Rosso had last season as well, but you can clearly see that kind of the way it just curves now and it's subtly formed looks a bit more like what Red Bull have in previous seasons. Toro Rosso have also moved forward the kind of turning vanes they've had underneath the suspension arms. To my mind, I think comparing pictures to the Abu Dhabi GP and Brazilian GP of last season, they looked to kind of move these forward in a more aggressive manner to maybe try and get that airflow a little bit earlier, picked up a little bit earlier, and then chuck it through to where they need it to go to the bargeboard area. Speaking of the bargeboard area, the actual boomerang wing over the top and all the kind of actual bargeboard itself looks pretty similar, just a very slight evolution from what they had last season. I expect them to kind of rock up maybe to preseason testing with something different. They also did launch with different side pod end plates. Depending on where you're looking. The online pictures that we're looking at right now are different to the car they showed in person. I believe the car in person that they showed very much had a lot of 2018 features to probably obviously hide anyone taking some close-up photos. So in the online photos, which I believe is the actual car they're going to be running with then, they've changed the end plates on the barge, on the side pod area to further kind of mimic what kind of Ferrari have been doing. And essentially, Taurus, I believe, kind of had more of a style that Haas had almost last season, where they had three different winglets with 3 slot gaps in between, whereas now they've shaped it like Ferrari with this L shape coming through and connecting to the upright. And then Taurus has gone for a bit of a unique situation. They were only a few teams that still have the classic old school vortex generators, which is a small little upright here. A lot of teams don't opt for that anymore because they're manipulating enough air with the wing mirror upright, and also they're now with the smaller inlets, they're kind of more focused on getting the air into the inlet and then around the side pod rather than perhaps getting it fixed on, because also these side pods are now getting so suckered in that there's hardly any more of an actual surface as we go along from, if you follow my mouse, from this point of the car, as we go backwards down the engine cover, there's less and less of an actual surface area they're wanting to stick it through, so they don't necessarily need a vortex generator to keep air attached. Essentially, the vortex generator creates a tip vortices on the edge, and that mixing, that vortex mixes and energizes the air and kind of keeps it attached a little bit further as it goes down on the engine cover. But with the side pods getting smaller and smaller these days, I guess that trend doesn't really need to be there if there's hardly a surface to actually attach to in terms of flat upright. And the Toro Rosso side pods have really been sucked in. I've tried to kind of show the geometry a little bit subtly. It's kind of hard to tell, obviously, with the way the lighting bounces off, but these side pods, I'm really impressed by them. Really, really tiny, really sucking into, especially what they had last season, the profiling difference. You'll see from the different angle from the top view, you can really see they've even the way the inlet is shaped, they've really pushed it back and slanted it. So this forward-facing part, which is just ahead of the crash structure, which is kind of obviously the mandated thing that FI have to have with every car, and like a lot of the top teams, Toro Rosso have opted to kind of build in a winglet with the crash structure. But the actual side pod inlet, it starts off here like the bottom edge, but the top edge ends around here. Like they've really pushed them back quite deeply, almost like what Ferrari did last season, where they had this winglet over the top, and so from the front view, it kind of tricks your eyes in thinking like there's two inlets, but it's the same inlet, but it's been cut over by the wing coming off the side of the chassis and building into this upright structure. So some really nice detailing there on the Toro, so I'm impressed with what they've got. And then the usual, obviously, like every single team now, you're going to be seeing these winglets. They had this last season, but it's more of an evolution now. It looks a bit more aggressive to what they had last season, what they ended off at Abu Dhabi, but that same sort of connection style like Ferrari have had. So very much compared to Red Bull, I think Toro Rosso has taken a bit more inspiration from a team like Ferrari, actually, with the way they've gone about this area. I would say Ferrari from last season, not Ferrari this season. Ferrari from last season. Of course, Ferrari this season have kind of copied what Red Bull have, ironically. So maybe it'll come full circle. Maybe next season, AlphaTauri will now finally copy Ferrari from this season, which copied Red Bull from last season. It's all very confusing, but you get what I mean. But it's all the same with midfield teams. Obviously, they're always trying to pick out maybe what the top teams have done and try and recreate it for themselves. Obviously, midfield teams still have their own philosophy, so they have to try and build it in and incorporate it to their car. But for a team like AlphaTauri, it makes sense that they're trying to take nods from Red Bull and also potentially some nods just from other top teams, because obviously there's a reason why they're top teams. They're getting it right. We look through from the front top view here. The front wing itself, it's hard to really tell, obviously, without kind of seeing the proper angles of it. But to me, it seems like they've slightly heightened heightened up the outwash part of the front wing, so they've raised the height a little bit. It looked like from previous pictures, it might be the angling, so I could be wrong, so don't take it for a complete factual statement here, but it looks like the angle is slightly less aggressive to what they had last season. Toro Rosso were very much kind of leaning towards what Ferrari and Alfa Romeo had, where it was very aggressively going low on this part of the front wing, whereas it feels like they've raised it a little bit to maybe try and join up with Red Bull, what Red Bull have, which makes sense, because if you think they're taking some inspiration from Red Bull's car of last season, it makes sense to then have a front wing that goes a little bit more towards what Red Bull had, whereas last season Toro Rosso were very much a bit more aggressive in that area, and it had a different philosophy of the front wing compared to their big sister team, essentially. Now you can see, I think these are the turning lanes. You can see they've been moved forward a little bit more. This entire area, like I mentioned, is very much just from what they had last season. I expect that to change in preseason testing, but for now in the launch spec they have, it's kind of basically what they ended up with last season. But this is what I mean now. You can see how odd these side pods look, and they've got this very odd shape where it really indents quite quickly at this point in the car then, and really suckers in. And then, like a lot of other teams, like McLaren, they've tried to get as much space here. Maybe not as much as McLaren, but they've really tried to shrink down these side pods. Again, very much a kind of trend of F1 these days. Every single year, they just seem to impossibly shrink these side pods then. And actually, when we get around to the Mercedes video, which I think will be coming tomorrow, unfortunately, guys, because I just don't have time to do it today, but Mercedes is kind of one of the best examples of how much they're going, how extreme they're going. But this is what I mean, taking inspiration from the Ferrari style of the winglet coming off the chassis. They've kind of almost split the inlet in two from this top view, but obviously the air can be directed above and below to where they need to go, either over the top or into the inlet directly, but very much almost like a kind of styling like Ferrari had last season. But then you can see the little detailing here of the vortex generators they've still opted for at the top here of the side, to just try and manipulate the air as it goes through to this region of the car, this kind of very important area where between the rear wheel and the rear wing, they're trying to create a bit of a kind of almost like a vacuum seal to make sure the diffuser works as efficiently as possible. So really important to try and get the air energized and actually more structured as it goes to that area of the car. But yeah, like I said, overall, really nice, just general mid-section of the car. Impressed by that. So hopefully it works out for them, and hopefully for their sake, they're also going to bring some upgrades with the bargeboard area. And I would hope that AlphaTauri have another strong season, really, this season. Just finally, before we round out the video, just getting a side profile view out of that upright, and you can very much see that kind of inspiration from Ferrari now with the L shape, the kind of dog leg connecting through then to the boomerang ring. I would say this area is going to be an important area for midfield teams, especially trying to catch up to the top teams, because you can see the difference clearly from the top to the midfield teams of how much more detailed they are perhaps, and what they've got going on essentially. From this side profile, you can see the undercut they've got going on the actual inlet itself in terms of this kind of cut in here, and then just the kind of trying to pick out the geometry lines, and you can really see the trend here of trying to push down this area of the engine cover really quite a lot. And this is what I meant by the vortex generator being here, less and less maybe need for a device like that, because there's hardly much of an upright. Because before, in like 2011, 2012, 2013, we used to have so much of a flat surface to about here, and then it would start to swoop down, whereas immediately now they're really tapering it down, so there's less of a need maybe, because there's less of a surface to actually attach that air to flow down towards the end of the car. Then again, here you can see very clearly there, that little nozzle, that's the air duct. So if you don't know, they take the air from the front and they inject it to the top. That injection it hopefully tries to try and keep the air as attached as it can be as it goes down the chassis front. So yeah, that was my little tech analysis of the AlphaTauri team. I'm having to keep making sure I call it AlphaTauri just to make sure I get into practice of it for next season on the game and in real life in terms of talking about it. So yeah, that is the AlphaTauri. I like what I'm seeing with what they've made, especially the kind of nods from the Red Bull car from last season. It's a good vibe generally. I get the feeling like they're going to have a decent season again like they had last season, and just generally, obviously, they ended off so strong, so I feel like they're going to take that momentum through, in my opinion. And in terms of delivery, like I said, dig it. I really love the fact that finally a team's massively changed. But like I said, let me know what you thought. If you did find the video informative and enjoyable to watch, guys, then be sure to hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you are new around here, just for weekly full-on content, I've been Aarava. Have a just a day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.